part of my life. I've known you my whole life, even though we've probably only met once. I think you did Loveline some years ago, Loveline, the radio show.
Radio.
But, of course, I grew up watching you on television. We'll get to your book. We'll get to cancer. We'll get to everything in a second. First thought was, I guess, John Ritter.
Yeah.
I loved that guy.
Me too.
I thought he was one of the just most genuine, nicest guys in the world.
Best physical actor of that generation. It was so interesting acting with him because it was like a ping pong ball game between the character I was playing, Chrissy Snow, and Jack Tripper. It's like if I paddled that ball across the table, it came back right away. And that was what it was like acting with him. I've never had anybody like that.
And I was just talking about what a great guy he was.
Okay.
I mean, he was a great actor.
No, he is a
and
great guy.
Physical actor,
He's
too.
uncomplicated. He's uncomplicated and nice, and he had his head on right. I liked being with him.
He just had a great presence.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought he was one of the nicest. I don't know, him and Henry Winkler are the two Hollywood guys.
Right.
I always say these two are nice.
Right. And they were friends.
In a sea of a-holes. He was it was an island of nice.
And funny.
Yeah.
Like genuinely funny.
Yeah.
And we would laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh.
Well, how now? Obviously, that's where we all met you. I guess we've done some commercials, you've done some guest appearances. I'm looking down on your bio and seeing things like the $6 Million Man and Billy Jack Goes to Washington. Did see that, and not too long ago, by the way, Starsky and Hutch, and you made the rounds. And, of course, American Graffiti. I guess American Graffiti is where we first sort of saw you, even if we didn't really hear you. Because you were just driving around in that T-Bird, right?
Just for a night.
That was just one night?
One night, right.
Did you know that movie was going to be what it was?
Really? They pick me up. They bring me to Petaluma, which is the egg capital of the world and the arm wrestling capital of the world. I lived in Northern California.
Seems like a bad thing to combine. Raw eggs and arm wrestling. It feels like there's going to be an inadvertent omelet on it.
Exactly.
It's really like, this is the bull capital of the world and the China capital of the world. Like, it just feels like two bad combinations. But
somebody got to move those. Well, I guess they're farmers. Like, still had farmers there.
So that was shot in Petaluma. Which
so
is,
I get there.
Petaluma's 2 hours out of L.A. or 3 hours out of L.A.?
About an hour and a half out of San Francisco, and I lived in Sausalito at that time.
Oh, okay.
So really what I was, they were just picking up local talent.
Right.
This was an insignificant part.
They needed a good-looking blonde who, it didn't matter if you could talk because you didn't have dialogue.
No. When I interviewed, there were 250 girls sitting in the waiting room, and all better looking than me, and I was thinking about, I have bridge toll and I've got dinner. I was a single mother. I was a teenage mother. And I said to the casting guy, I can't stay because it's going to take forever and I can't afford the parking. And he said, well, George was really interested in your picture. Let me see if he'll see you now. So they bring me in, and George Lucas is not a tall man, and he was slumped behind his desk. So to me, it kind of looked like a head.
Right.
And he looked at me and he said, can you drive? And I said, yeah. And he said...
If you weren't blonde, they would have asked that, by the way.
Right, exactly. And then he said, thank you very much. Right, thank you very much. And I walked out and I thought, well, I'm glad I didn't waste all that money on parking. And then I think I got the part because I think I looked like who he had in mind, somebody, some fantasy girl of his. Because it wasn't that I was the best looking girl in that room, for sure.
Well,
really, no, I was.
You're in the top 10.
No, I don't know. You don't know what you look like.
Shiksa in mind,
probably,
and you fit that bill. And it was a fun role. I mean, it was fun to watch because it was this mystery woman in a white. I guess it was a 55 T-Bird, and
57.
Sorry, 57 T-bird. Oh, at least it was white. I got that part
right.
And just seeing you sort of pop in and pop out and pop in, it was fun. I know, it just made it interesting.
But I just, drive down this street, drive down this street, and then this guy I've never seen before in my life, Richard Dreyfuss, looks at me and says, "Oh my God," and then he told me to drive away. I didn't know what I was doing or why. I hadn't read the script. But what really gave me my career was Johnny Carson. I was one of the lucky ones. I was one of Johnny's girls. And the way that I met Johnny was I read up in Sausalito about the Dom DeLuise show. And they're looking for a girl, and they described me, small town girl. And the description was me, and I thought, I bet I could get that. I flew down on PSA at that time, which is not even an existing airline anymore. Right. And ignorance is bliss. I don't have an agent. I go to ABC, and I said, I'm here for the Dom DeLuise show. And they said, oh, it's there. And I go, and I sign in. I don't have an agent. I don't know how this happened. They bring me in to read. I come out.
What year is this?
73, I believe. And I get the part. I get this part. And so while I'm waiting to get this part, I go to the commissary. Because they said, you have a callback. And I said, what's a callback? And they said, we're going to call you back.
It's like asking what a toaster is.
Exactly. Oh, right. I know what a callback. So I'm sitting in the commissary, and Johnny Carson walks in with Fred DeCordova, who was his producer at that time. It was like 2 PM, so the commissary was empty. And Johnny comes over to me, and he says, hey, little lady, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm waiting to see. I've got a callback. And I said, and I'm an author. I've written a book of poetry. And he said, well, good for you. So after he left, I sent a copy to his office and to Fred DeCordova and to their secretaries. And that was Wednesday.
A book of poetry.
Book of poetry. And Friday night, I'm on The Tonight Show, and I'm standing behind the curtain. I've never been on television before. And I hear Johnny say, we've all been wondering who the mysterious blonde in the Thunderbird was. Well, we found her. So I wasn't on because they loved my poetry. They read the back flap. But then I got along with him so well that he'd have me on every month reading poems about feelings and emotions, and he always had that ISO camera so that he could do face takes, and I was a great foil for him. So that went on for a number of years, and at one of those performances, Fred Silverman saw me and put me on Three's Company.
He would have Jimmy Stewart come on there and read like poems about his dog and stuff.
And you loved it.
It is.
And you loved it.
I did. I mean, maybe it was the fact that it was James Stewart talking about his dog. I couldn't figure out why, but it was interesting. No one would ever do that anymore. I'm not so sure why, but it was compelling. It was fun. Because
back then you didn't have to sell something. You just came on to come on. Now it's all you vie for spots on talk shows. And
so Fred Silverman saw you on Johnny Carson.
They'd already booked. They'd already cast 2 different Chrissy Snows, 2 different pilots. She didn't test. Neither of them tested well, but they had a pickup for the series. So they really desperately needed a Chrissy Snow, and that's how I got it.
Was Three's Company, now it's all in vogue, your offices and your American Idols and all that kind of shows out of Britain that we're now picking up out over here, sitcoms and variety shows and things like that, reality shows. But Three's Company was out of Britain, or it was one of the...
Man About the House.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was, to my knowledge, one of the first times a network had taken an idea out of Britain. It probably isn't. Probably the 55th
All in the Family
time.
Was I could be wrong.
Could be.
But I think, because that was the whole Norman Lear.
Oh, really? It's interesting, and it's not something... I remember at the time never even hearing about it or thinking about it. Now it's sort of commonplace.
Right.
But back at the time... But it's funny watching the British version of it and seeing the British version of you and Jack Tripper and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, not nearly as good. So
Chrissy Snow... if you only get one great role in your life, that was mine. And it was such a complete character. I had never had anything like that before, where I morphed into her. As soon as I got to work and started doing her, she walked different, she talked different, she held her shoulders up, she dressed different. I totally morphed into, and I knew how she thought. and had made a box for her, a moral code. I didn't know anything about acting, but I knew who this person was, and I would just become her.